Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. If you happen to live up in the northern part of the country, you are feeling the effects of fall moving in. Our overnight temps, our daily highs are dropping rapidly. Our water temperatures are dropping rapidly. And one of my favorite ways to catch them during this transition period where you're going from summer into true fall techniques and fall water temperatures is to fish micro jigs. Small jigs are excellent at just getting numbers of bites, but you still have the potential to really catch some very, very big fish. It's just one of those things that does a great job at mimicking a lot of the small crayfish as well as a lot of the young of the year bluegill that when you're entering in this time period are only a few inches long, and they provide a major, major food source for bass starting to store up food for the winter. And I've just found over the years that a jig really starts coming into its prime when that water temperature starts to drop. And this is not something that's just up here for the North Country. This will excel throughout the entire United States and anywhere you're catching bass, and it works very well for all of the major bass species. So I want to share with you the specific baits that I like to use and when I like to throw them, because even though they're all really small jigs, these jigs are all built very differently. You would think a jig is a jig, but by no mean are all jigs made the same. And in this case, especially when you start talking about small jigs, they're really very much built for very specific instances. So that's what we're going to get into. Before I do, though, I want to remind you guys that if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel and you want to support the channel, hit that subscriber button. It's a great way to show your support for the channel. Also, if you're looking to purchase some tackle, please use my Tackle Warehouse affiliate link that I'll put in the video description. Every little bit I get from that comes right back into making content for you guys and hopefully helps both you and me catch more bass. So let's talk a little bit about these finesse jigs. A lot of times you're really talking about fishing them more in your hard target areas, whether that's rock bank, whether that's around wood, maybe docks. Generally speaking, these are going to be used in relatively shallower water, probably that 8-foot depth or less. And that just has to do with the small compact. A lot of them are very light in size, and a lot of them are just made to be fished around those areas that have some cover, but really do a very good job at just generating strike from fish that may not be very active. And when you've got falling water temperatures, that's when your hard targets really start to come into play because they absorb heat, produce heat, and provide more heat for the fish, which generally is something that keeps a lot of fish hanging around those objects. So I'm going to walk you through each one of these, and I'm just going to kind of point out the ones that I really like. Some of these I've talked about on the channel before, so if you watch on a regular basis, you know that these are baits that I use on a regular basis. Like this guy right here, this is the tightrope firework jig. It's a super finesse firework jig. This is an absolute killer for fishing around your rock. It was made for fishing around the Great Lakes rock structure and like break walls. So it's really made to come through a lot of rock. But at the same time, it's got a stiff wire weed guard that does allow you to fish it around wood cover as well. But one of the things that I love about this bait, because the skirt is tied real tight, it actually will kind of walk along the bottom. So if you're also fishing an area that has a bunch of slime or filament that's growing on the bottom, this jig does a very good job at kind of just walking across the bottom and not getting balled up like a lot of other baits do. And this time of year, we start seeing a lot of that, kind of that black LJ type filament stuff. You get a lot of lakes that start having filament that's growing on the rocks, and it just has to do with the fact that we've had a full growing season. We've had the warmest water temperatures out there, so you have a lot of weed growth and a lot of different things out there. But this little firework jig does a really good job. You can tip it with a bunch of different things. This is a Poor Boy Erie Darter Jr. that I've cut part of it off. It just does a really good job at mimicking some bluegill and crayfish. Absolute killer bait. I love this little guy. I've been fishing it for a long, long time. Now, a lot of times during this transition period, if you fish in the North Country, you get a lot of fish that start roaming flats. A lot of smallmouth, a lot of largemouth. They're going to be in that 10-foot range or less. And a lot of times one of your best baits for that is a Ned rig. And I got to tell you, one of the things that I've really kind of fallen in love with is this little guy right here. So this is the Z-Man. It's just their finesse what is it? The micro finesse shrooms jig, I believe is what they call it. So it's basically their shroom head, which is one of the top sellers for throwing Ned rigs. And they've put a skirt on it, and they've got a double wire weed guard on it. And then what I like to do is actually cut down a finesse TRD and then put that on as the trailer. So it just creates a real small little profile. But I fish this in the exact same places where I would fish a standard, TRD, or if you're throwing any of your other Ned rigs, I'm going to throw it in that same area. So a lot of times you're talking about your flats where you have some rock transitions, maybe you got some holes in the grass, maybe isolated boulders. It just seems like it generates a lot of really good bites from bigger quality fish. So if you're in an area where you're catching a lot of small fish, a lot of 10, 12-inch fish on whatever Ned rig it is that you're throwing, you put this guy on and it seems to generate some bigger bites. Now, this is one I took right out of the package. I will say I generally trim the skirt up a little bit so that it's not quite as far as the bottom of the bait. The other thing is I feel like the weed guard is a little bit overpowering for the hook. So generally I take at least one off and I'll just leave a single wire. If not, I'll actually cut both off at times if I'm fishing more just on a sand flat with some gravel or maybe some boulders. But if I am fishing around some wood, I will leave just one wire weed guard. But I personally feel like the two of them is overkill on this little jig. The next one. So this is one that I've been experimenting with quite a bit over the last couple of years. This is the Kitech, it's their spin jig, their guarded spin jig, tungsten guard spin jig. So it's a tiny little jig. This thing is one of the smallest jigs that I'm aware of. It's actually, this is the size 2 hook. So it's a really small little bait with a, a real little wire or bristle weed guard, tungsten head on it. And I gotta tell you, if you're looking at catching fish on jigs, this thing is very much like candy. There's a lot of baits out there that do a really good job at catching numbers of fish, whether that's like a small little swim bait, a little 2.8, little 3.3, maybe you're talking a wacky rig, General or Senko or whatever your soft stick bait favorite is. A drop shot can be an excellent bait at catching fish. A Ned rig can be as well. This little guy right here is an absolute dynamite jig for just getting bites. Now, I will say you're going to catch a lot of fish on this. You're going to catch everything from rock bass and perch and bluegill all the way up to a lot of 6-inch bass, but you'll still catch a lot of really quality bass. I actually at times will fish this not even with a trailer, but if I'm looking for a trailer, I'd be throwing some of your really small little craw baits. Kitech actually makes a little tiny spider rig bait, a little spider bait that works great on this. And then I'll also put like the Maxent, the little craws, their little, what is it called? The little, drawing a blank on it. It's not the General, it's the little critter, or it's the little craw. I could get one. I don't recall off the top of my head, but they're just any little craw style bait is what you're going to be looking for. It just does a really good job at just getting tons and tons of bites. Next up, so if I'm looking at fishing heavier cover, this is one that I've had in my arsenal for years. This goes back to probably one of the first baits that really got me into fishing jigs. And this is just this guy right here. This is the Strike King Bitsy Flip. So the Bitsy Bug was their really small compact jig, one of probably the first really little jigs on the market. But one of the problems that a lot of people had with that was it was a light wire hook. And Strike King a long time ago came out with their Bitsy Flip. So it was a little heavier bait, a little heavier lead down the shank, and a much stouter hook with a little stouter weed guard as well. So if I'm looking for a really small profile flipping jig, this is going to be the ones that I'll go to. I'll put any of your basic small little trailers that you like, whether it's a little zoom chunk, a little cross style bait, you can really put it on this and you can get this thing into the heaviest cover that you'd throw a big normal flipping jig into, and you can get it out. So I really do like throwing a Bitsy Flip at times. And then the last one, and again, this is one I always talk about on the channel. This is a Kitech tungsten casting jig. I've got it just paired up. This is a little Zoom Chunk Junior on the back. This thing is really good at just kind of casting around, fishing a lot of water. You can fish it through cover, you can fish it through rock, you can throw it into grass holes. This to me is like a really good all-purpose jig that I tend to have tied on if I know I'm going to be fishing jigs all day, and I've got this thing where I know I'm going to be fishing a lot of different types of cover. So if you're talking about places like the Ozarks region, where maybe you're going down a bank, you want something to flip under a dock, you've got maybe a lay down tree, you've got some stair-stepping rocks. That's generally where I like to throw it. I also will add that I really like to throw it when there's rock around because it is that tungsten head, but it seems to get a lot of really good bites. It's just been a jig that I've thrown for years at this point, and I know it's one that a lot of the pros throw on tour as well. It's won a lot of money out there. It doesn't get the credit that it deserves. I can tell you that based on a lot of wins that have occurred on this jig, but have been talked about or not mentioned because other jigs were given the credit. But this guy right here is an absolute dynamite jig as well. But those 5 micro jigs, those are really small jigs, generate a lot of bites, but at the same time can get you some really big bites. And this is the time of year to start picking up the jig. A jig will work as soon as the water temperature starts falling all the way down pretty much into the coldest parts of the winter. And if you're not throwing some micro jigs, I highly recommend checking it out because they will get you a lot of bites that bigger jigs will not get. And if you're talking about matching the hatch right now, a lot of the forage species look a lot like these jigs that I just mentioned. So hopefully this helps you catch a few more fish. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned, new video coming out tomorrow.